Baba knows the way. For Joseph Baba Ifa, Baba knows the way. We follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients. He honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.
Egungun, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗿𝗁, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗁, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗁, 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗱𝗲, mango egunde, 𝗵𝗂𝗶𝗱𝗲, nalegun, ashede, asheo. What's up, Phil?
That was awesome. You
You
gotta start the show every show needs to be like that.
We got started. We got to kick it off with a verse.
Jeez, man.
Yeah, so
I think you're more talented than you say you are.
Oh,
you have
man.
a very pleasant singing voice.
I appreciate that, man. I learned how to sing in church, man. Isn't that ironic?
Right?
I'll never forget Miss Janice's choir, man. I went to Catholic school, bro, and I remember she actually wanted to start training me for opera and stuff like that. You know, I had some size on me, so she thought I could hold a note. We were actually, you know, my mom just, you know, this old school Cuban family. We don't go on trips, but we were thinking about going to Rome and stuff like that, and starting an apprenticeship and just, you know, a bunch of stuff.
What do you sing at? What's your?
Oh, I don't know, brother.
octave?
I mean, if anybody could tell me what my natural tone is, I'd love to know, because I've never delved like that. You know, I don't know. I've kind of always been predisposed to my own sound. I went through a little bit of I guess trauma. You know, originally I was really criticized for the way I sang, so I really put a lot of effort into it and wanted to be good at it. So, you know, some people think it's all right.
Well, that was a great treat, and I'm sure everybody in the chat loved it.
I appreciate
Welcome everybody to another episode.
What's going on? Our Roots podcast, Joseph Baba Ifa, strongest roots see the light. You know what it is, guys. Just wanted to start the episode a little bit differently today, because we're going on over how to take care of Egungun. That's actually one of the oriki for Egungun. You know, it mentions the bata drum. It mentions you know, the blessings from Egungun and all those things like that. It's a pretty staple one. It's one of my favorite ones to actually throw, as I like to say. So just wanted to start it off like that. And we're very excited because today's episode is how to take care of Egungun. You guys are really responding so well to the how-to videos that Miss 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗁 comes up with. Hello, honey. And so we've gone over how to take care of Ori, how to take care of the warriors. We decided to go ahead and do how to take care of Egungun because it is a very exposed deity. Probably won't be able to get into too many others, being that they live enclosed. So how to take care of 𝗃𝗏𝗏 and the other Orishas is going to be a little tedious. But, you know, the ones that are exposed, you know, maybe we could go over like an 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏 or something like that in the future, just because they kind of live out. Maybe, you know, 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃, no promises. But if we are going to come out with more of these, specifically from an Orisha standpoint on how to take care of them, it definitely has to be one of the ones that is exposed, just to, you know, respect our tradition. You know, and regardless of whether things are consecrated or not, you know, if you take care of them in a certain fashion, you're kind of revealing what's in there. In my humble opinion, I respect everybody, but, you know, I still hear my Godfather in my ear and my elders in my ear like, hey, you know, we're still secrets. So very happy to be able to come out with this. And we've kind of taken over the studio today, Phil. It drew some African graffiti.
So what I was going to say, this is a visual episode. So if you are happening to listen on Spotify or iHeart or Amazon or any of the other podcast apps, get off of the app, go to YouTube and watch this video. So because I had to, you know, install another camera in the studio, which I charged Joseph for.
As you should.
Okay, so
you saw the gold sneakers. You're like, oh, man.
So
yesterday's price is not today's price.
So can I show it?
Of course, please. Yeah.
Here we go. Boom.
There we go, guys. We have an Egungun altar / icon, right? So what we're going to go over today is, what does all of this mean? What could your steps look like? Even for the people that don't have Egungun, it's a nice visual to kind of understand what your responsibilities would be. The preliminary steps of Ifa are meant to be just that, preliminary and entry level. You know, we're talking about the time requirements that it takes on a weekly basis, usually 15 to 20 minutes a week between all the things that you may have. So, for example, Egungun is no different. So what we're going to do is go through each of the steps so you can kind of be able to visualize it. And apart from that, understand the difference between the 𝘃𝗵𝗍 aspect of things and the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗍 as well. So whenever we provide Egungun, at least here at Botanica Candles and More, we try to give everything. What do I mean by everything? I was initiated into a 𝘃𝗵𝗍 context, right? But I also went through an 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗍 apprenticeship on how to give it in the traditional fashion. So, you know, hybridization is something that has to be taken very lightly. I don't believe that we should hybridize to the point where we lose an identity per se, but I do believe hybridization can be beneficial when it comes to the enrichment of a ceremony. So, for example, when I learned both of these based on both different traditions, I realized that they could benefit each other, where there were holes in each other's process. You know, you have some people who say, hey, 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗍 is perfect, there are no holes. You have some people say, hey, 𝘃𝗵𝗍 is perfect, and we have no holes. But I do think there are, you know, segments or fragments that we could definitely fill in the puzzle pieces for each other. So from a traditional standpoint, when you receive a Egungun, it's pretty streamlined. You get a clay plate, you'll get the Sang Egungun icon, which is this this right here. And you'll also probably get a red cloth, right? And the red cloth is to cover Egungun, because Egungun means bones, right? So when we say Isang Egungun, we mean the staff of the 9 of the bones, basically. So what you'll see here with the Egungun icon is it's 9 𝗿𝗲𝗍 sticks, or 𝗿𝗲𝗍 mesang, which is basically 9 sticks of 𝗿𝗲𝗍. Now, the 𝗿𝗲𝗍 was identified in the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗍 as being the stick of the ancestors because it's identified as the oldest stick on earth. So it's the link between us and our ancestors, which some people believe are nothing short of the trees, right? That's why we feed sticks, to be able to feed our ancestors. And then if you look at the 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗍𝗏, it's where sacrifices would happen or people would pass away, and then they would tie their bodies to the trees for them to decompose upon. When Oya was found to have been, you know, philanderous or infidelitous to Shango, they decided to bury her, right, alive. And the tree said, okay, well, even though she's not on us, we'll be able to extract the nutrients through the decomposition process via the roots. So that's why Egungun is constructed out of wood. It's a pretty foreign concept for 𝘃𝗵𝗍 people, being that we're always like, you know, the rocks, you know, like 𝘃𝗍𝗂 has a rock on top of his head. And if you look in the plate as it is right now, I also provide a rock when I provide Egungun, which is a very 𝘃𝗵𝗍, you know, context or concept, which can be found in the 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗏. But I'm still of the concept, I like a rock in any of my icons to a certain degree, because, you know, it's something that is eternal. It's something that symbolizes quite a bit for us. And, you know, visible. You know, 𝘃𝗍𝗂 has a rock on his head. You're going to see an Egungun icon with a rock right next to it. None of this is necessarily private or secret per se. It can be private based on a person's ownership and habits, but secret not necessarily. So to start from the very beginning, right, how would you take care of Egungun? You can always start with an 𝗃𝗏𝗍. 𝗃𝗏𝗍 tends to lean itself more towards initiated people, being that they've gone through process to be able to be heard in a very specific way by the Orisha. Now, I can't say that it is off limits to anyone who hasn't gone through priesthood rites, but always refer back to your elders of 𝗃𝗏𝗍 Ifa, because to be able to have Egungun, you have to have at least 𝗃𝗏𝗍 Ifa, right? Because to be able to consecrate this, we need your Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗍 Ifa to know how to. So definitely confer with them, because whatever they say is really the final judgment and word. So, you know, you'll start with that. The first step is the 𝗃𝗏𝗍, right? 𝗃𝗏𝗍 means the mist descends. It means I'm working with you. So look at me, or I'm looking at you because I want to work with you, right? So it's usually done in a 2-part step. The first part is the rum, right? And I have a little rum here in my cap to be able to pour it. Now, mind you, you always have the elephant spit option, which I'm not going to do because it's going to turn off the candles. But just know that, you know, you have that option as well. So, and usually, flavor right there for Isang. Usually, I save the candles for the end when I'm taking care of Egungun. Most people say it should be done at the beginning, like 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗲𝗍 says. But when you read the 𝗀𝗲𝗹𝗁 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲, it says that the candles can be placed at the end. So it really depends on your study and what you choose to apply in your lineage, right? But I have them here from the beginning just for, teaching purposes, right? So we'll do the 𝗃𝗍 with the rum. Then we'll repeat with the water the way I do it, right? And then after that, you can light the candles, right? So in the case that they were being lit now, there's a couple different prayers that you'll see priests use. Now, these are pretty priestly, right? Especially, Egungun is very influenced by Ifa, being that 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 took such a huge role in its consecration and manifestation here on earth. So when the Babalawo kicks off with Egungun, if he lights the candles up front or in the back, he'll usually pray the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗲𝗁𝗍𝗍, which speaks a lot about the light, the flame, the candle, the illumination of the Egungun icon. Being that when we look at the modern manifestation of the Egungun icon, it was born in 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍𝗁, but the way it's confectioned and looks is pretty stipulated in 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍𝗁. So when you look at it, you'll see the 9 sticks. You'll see it wrapped in something. Like this one's wrapped in reptile skin, being that the snake is seen as the primordial ancestor, being that it's affiliated with the rainbow. And if you look at the 𝗃𝗏𝗏, it actually has a cylindrical circular engraving on it, which is supposed to be reminiscent of a snake, being that a snake is seen as the reptile that goes all the way back to creation. So you'll see that, and then you'll see it wrapped somehow. Usually this is actually pretty rare and it's pretty beautiful because you'll see the multiple colors of Egungun there. Egungun's necklace is manifested through different colors because everybody's ancestors comes from different places and we all look different. So it's going to be pretty synonymous with the necklace that has to do with Osaing, and there's a reason for that, but unrelated to this video. So usually you'll see it wrapped in red cloth or a combination of red, black, and white. Things like that can be found in the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗍𝗁, where it says the 3 cloths provided divination and only the red one actually told the truth, where he said, the prince was going to die. The white one was forced to be buried with the cadaver. That's why people get buried in white usually, because it lied. And then the black cloth was meant to live in purgatory or amongst the living in mourning, because he didn't have an interpretation at all. It was seen as cowardly. So that's why people go dressed in black to funerals, right? So, and by the way, Phil provides a fabulous funeral recording service.
Hey,
I'll throw that out there.
Thank you, man.
Absolutely. We'll get some placement. We got to throw a commercial in there, brother. But yeah, if God forbid anybody has transitioned or whatnot and you're looking for an absolutely pristine and fabulous recording and memorial for that loved one, definitely hit up Phil. His contact information for sure is in the description, if not more. So you'll see that. And then apart from that, when you look at the Isang, you'll see cowries. Now, Isang Egungun has to do with longevity. It has to do with health. It has to do with procreation is really big. But it also has to do with prosperity. When you look at Odus like 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗍𝗁 or even Odus like 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏, it speaks of when Egungun came down from heaven and people started throwing money at him. And the reason people started throwing money at him is because he was dancing and he was having a great time. And he was very entertaining. So they would shower him with money, So that's why you see the cowrie shells on top of the Isang Egungun icon. Because Egungun is an Orisha of prosperity. I mean, when you look at all of the costs that go into a proper funeral or Egun rites or any of these things, they're extremely costly. A modern funeral, the tutu rites, the onras, any of the manifestations that we have within our faith and practice, we're talking about thousands of dollars sometimes, based on all the different professionals, the amounts of food, animals, materials, the drum, all the things that go into it. Ultimately Egungun has to do with prosperity because everything that had to do with him costed money, right? So if you're going to start off with the candles, usually the brother Babalawo will pray out 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗍𝗁, or he'll pray out and he'll do like 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗁, right? So we spoke about 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗍𝗁, but like for example, when we pray 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗁 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏, it speaks of 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗁 and 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗂. Now, that's why if you notice with Egungun, there's 2 candles. the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗵𝗍𝗃 also speaks of this, why Egungun takes 2 candles rather than one, like the warriors do. Orunmila takes 2 candles as well, but the majority of the other Orishas, depending, can take 1 or 2. But Egungun is at least 2, because sometimes you'll even see 9, but the most classic is the 2. Because in 𝗵𝗺 Imosun, it speaks of 2 brothers, 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗃, the priest of light, and 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗃, the priest of darkness. And one of them died. And, you know, the other one was in great mourning because of it. He was also somebody who would make a lot of money off of doing a ceremony known as the 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗲, which is Ifa's version of the exorcism. And, you know, he was doing this at a very high volume, and his brother actually visited him in a dream saying, hey, if you continue like this, you're going to suffer negative repercussions like I did. What you need to do is incorporate both of our candles next to the Egungun icon to be able to protect yourself when you're doing this process for others. And so you always have my full support, because by elevating me over here, being that we were twins, I'm always going to protect you on the other side. So that's why commonplace Egungun takes 2 candles. So you'll start with those things, or end with them, like the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗵𝗍𝗃 says. From a 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗃 standpoint, you know, the Egun has multiple 𝘃𝗶𝗃s for, you know, 𝗃𝗲𝗃, or candles. The word 𝗃𝗲𝗃 really is 𝗃𝗲𝗃, which is 𝗃𝗲𝗃, which means we light the grease, because they're usually made out of oils and things like that, specifically red palm oil. But it ended up becoming 𝗃𝗲𝗃, which means I like the grease. But for example, of the 5 that, you know, I'm aware of, one of them, the most basic one, is Egun 𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗷, Hitan 𝗲𝗷𝗁𝗷, Egun fumi 𝗲𝗷𝗁𝗷, Hitan 𝗲𝗷𝗁𝗷, Shango 𝗲𝗷𝗁𝗷, Hitan 𝗲𝗷𝗁𝗷, Egun fumi 𝗲𝗷𝗁𝗷, Hitan 𝗲𝗷𝗁𝗷, where you say Hitan 𝗲𝗁𝗷 means the candle is coming. Egun 𝗲𝗁𝗷, right? Egun is coming. Egun fumi 𝗲𝗁𝗷, Egun, please provide to me as you arrive. So basically the candles are for the illumination of Egun. They're to get Egun's attention and blessings from him, right? And, you know, overall, it's always been a commemoration. It's a memoriam, right? Because they're always seeking the light. I mean, when we look at, even though we're not going to get into the Oro to Egun here, per se, we might get into a couple 𝘃𝗶𝗃s during the workshop. You know, when you sing, you're saying that I'm calling them, but I don't see them, which is, they may be sleeping, but I don't see them, you know? So that's why we put the candles and whatnot, like the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗵𝗍𝗃 says, because the spirits and the energies, they know where to go based on wherever, you know, the light is, right? So you'll start with that. So we've gone over 𝗍𝗍, you have the candles, right? Egungun, you know, when you look at the traditional concept of 𝗃𝗍, you know, is going to be attended every 4 days. But for the random Ifa practitioner, I would say once a month is more than enough, based on all of the obligations and time constraints we have in a capitalist system. Once a month for sure. Egungun really doesn't have taboos. One of the biggest ones, if there are any, would be black palm oil, which is pretty debatable. But if you could resist it, I would. But then again, if you look at like all the ancestors of Ogun, they all consumed black palm oil. So from a spiritual standpoint, you have to come to that own conclusion. Always refer back to your elders. I personally don't put it, just, you know, based out of concept. For most of the Orishas, black palm oil is going to be a taboo, except for like the Orisha Ogun, who can't get enough of the stuff. But Egungun eats everything. You're going to hear some people say that red palm oil shouldn't be placed on the Egungun icon. This isn't something that is based on taboo per se. It's more to preserve the integrity of the wood, because it can have a corroding effect. And, you know, this thing doesn't last forever. It's wood, it's beads, it's cloth. So, you know, what they do instead is they would provide it to the earth itself, being that Egungun technically lives in the earth, right? In the clay. So anything is perfectly fine. Let's say we had some chicken that day. That's what we can offer Egungun. You can literally offer to Egungun every day. You know, whatever your ancestors ate, whatever you're eating, it's literally just a part of the family. Where should this go? I think before we go any further, as far as offerings, where should this go? Ideally, Egungun should live outside. Ideally, Egungun should live on earth or soil, right? Like he did in back home in Africa. You know, you want him in contact with the ground. Now, based on certain living conditions, not everyone's able to express themselves that way. That's why if you notice, part of the icons are made out of clay to be able to maintain that energy, whether it's him living in the clay plate that you see there or resting upon the clay tile, right, behind him. But ideally, Egungun should live outside, but if he is not, or if he's living on concrete or a floor or whatnot, to be able to set it up, and this is for people with Egungun who have gone through the rites, or from a 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 standpoint, anybody that has received their 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲, being that they're two very different concepts, you would draw the half circle like you see down there with the 9 lines. The 9 lines represent Egungun, all 9 brothers that guard the afterworld or the afterlife, so that they know their space and we know ours, right? We don't want to just have it open because then there's like a confluence that could be counterproductive. Now, why don't we have to draw this in the dirt? Because 𝘃𝗶𝗹𝗁 mitigates that within itself. But if you're somebody that wants to draw it anyway, just by drawing it in the dirt, you don't necessarily have to put the 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 at that point or the chalk. You're more than welcome to. I've done it before from time to time, depending on how I felt that day. So that's the first thing as far as setting up the shrine. So apart from that, Egungun on a monthly basis, rum, water, you have the food offering, you have the candles. Another thing is flowers. This could be found in the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗃𝗃 or 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗃𝗃. 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃 speaks of it as well. The flowers were actually meant to be a refreshing thing. It was meant to, kind of take away from the pestilence of decomposition. When we look at the 𝘃𝗶𝗶𝗃𝗃, it speaks of when Orunmila made his first colognes out of flowers and aromatic herbs such as basil, sage, rosemary, mint, and all these different things. So that's why we offer flowers to Egungun. But the key part is to offer them without water, right? Being that it is a, metaphor for life or the loss of it, right? Because as soon as a flower is placed outside of water and not hydrated, it begins to, wither. So it's a commemoration of, nothing lasts forever, right? That's in the 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃 or 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃. And when you put flowers to Egungun, you don't put them with water. You put them dry, right? Hey, family. This is Joseph Baba Ifa. Are you looking for a space to host your next event, a wedding, a baby shower, something memorable? Well, we want you to consider one of our sponsors, Luna Hall and Studio, a beautiful event space located in downtown Orlando that has some great visuals for you to create all of those memories. Please be sure to check in the description for the link to know what our daily rates look like, or even 3 days at a time. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you there soon. So that's a key little fact there. And there's various suyas for that as well. But depending on people's levels, priesthoods, and things like that, you can keep it as generic as just putting the flowers. So you'll see that. So let's get into the differences as far as how shrines would look. So when you talk about a 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃 standpoint, where do we find our legitimacy? So the half circle with the chalk is completely 𝘃𝗶𝗃 concept, right? And the reason it was innovated or identified over here is because most of the time Egungun is in a garage or in a shed or on some form of cobblestone, concrete, backyard situation, and people just have their habits. So they draw their circle with the 9 lines. So that's a completely 𝘃𝗶𝗃 concept. The clay plate is synonymous. It's ambiguous. You see it in the Afro-Cuban space, and you see it in the the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗃𝗃 space. So in the 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃 space, they're not going to write all these odus and things like that. It's simply a place for Egungun to live. I have seen, from an 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃 standpoint, that Egungun actually gets implanted into the plate, but they do it with a natural material. I've seen it done with shea butter. That's pretty much the one time I saw it. If not, it's a leaning concept, or it's wrapped. Sometimes you'll even see it laying down. So with the clay plate, I've seen it on both sides. Now, there is another concept within the Afro-Cuban 𝗃𝗶𝗍 context that's a little more modern and innovated now, where you'll see Egungun actually given, you'll see the tile, right? Implanted in a clay plate with cement, things like that. You know, everybody has their own book. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's definitely something that wasn't, you know, there at the beginning of the inception of the Egungun 𝗃𝗶𝗍 process. Being that cement as well wasn't necessarily a ready commodity. You know, the tile for the most part has always lived free. It's now that we're seeing a little bit more where it's being given a 𝗃𝗃𝗃 and things like that, which is nothing wrong, but just so people understand the difference between the two, and that if you have one or the other, there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, Egungun is a natural energy that likes to be as liberated as possible. So the clay plate and the 𝗃𝗶𝗍 side, sometimes you'll actually see 𝗲𝗲𝗍s painted in the plate. So popular 𝗲𝗲𝗍s that you might see in the plate, and once again, this is all exposed. 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁, which is the, or 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍𝗃, 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁, which is the captain of the female Egun, right? Or 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗃 or 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗃. You have 𝗿𝗃𝗃𝗃 or 𝗿𝗃𝗃𝗃, which is the captain of Egun-Okuni, or the masculine ancestors. And you might see other 𝗲𝗲𝗍s like 𝗃𝗏𝗏, which has huge spiritual connotations, being that the 𝗵𝗏𝗍s were identified ancestrally through the pigs, or 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗍, which speaks of the whole and things like that. And you might see variations of the other two signs, but those are usually the four you might see. Sometimes 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗍 slips in there, but not as popular as the other two that I mentioned. Depending on the process. So when you look at the tile, and we're going to get to all the signs now. When you look at the tile manifested in the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍. Once again, strictly 𝗃𝗶𝗍 concept, right? So what happened is there was somebody that transitioned in the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍. They buried them, but when they went to excavate the remains or make the offerings, they found that the tile had petrified in a way that looked like this. Representing the human body, right? So you'll notice on the outside, and I always forget concave and all these other things, forgive me, but the outside part, or the curved part on the exterior, usually represents the masculine aspect. That's where you'll see the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍 painted, or 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍. On the inside, or the more receptive aspect of the tile, you're going to see the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍, which is painted on the other side of this one. But to move it, you know, it's going to take some time to get it balanced that perfectly again. It's no easy feat. But the reason we do it like this is because in Africa or in Nigeria, you literally go to your backyard and feed the ground, and your ancestors were right there. There was no reason to harness any energy there. You know, they're already there, harnessed and, you know, petrified within the dirt, which is reddish clay. But in the New World, being that we didn't have access to our ancestors, or if we did, we weren't able to perform this process in a cemetery or anything nearly of the sort, we had to innovate and call the energy to wherever we were. So we took some of the dirt and the clay, we have a tile, we started painting 𝗿𝗲𝗍s that have to do with this concept, and just like that, we have a legitimate process just by harnessing certain natural elements at a key moment, right? So that's where you'll see that. So you're gonna notice on the front of the tile, an 𝗿𝗲𝗍 is painted. 𝗿𝗲𝗍 Ifa should only be painted by babalawos, right? Being that we have the Ashen process to be able to capture those combinations in nature, it should only be done by a babalawo. Now, let's say you've fed this thing so much, and, you know, it's gotten washed, and it's gotten, you know, ingredients on it and all these different things. You don't have to redraw it at that point. It's symbolic from the first time. Just because you can't see it visibly doesn't mean it can't be invoked, or that the energy is not already there in the porous exterior of the tile, right? So the masculine and the feminine, you know, that's basically our existence, right, from a natural standpoint, based on creation. Now, sometimes you'll see other tiles that have 100 signs painted on them, which is perfectly fine. Technically, you could paint all 256 𝗿𝗲𝗍s of Ifa on the tile, because all of them speak of Egungun, because all of them are ancestors or had ancestors, right? To the point where I'm at the stage of my career where if somebody sees a tile that I've given, I usually put the person's 𝗿𝗲𝗍 of Hand of Ifa there, Why? Oturanico is great. Irete Hierro is wonderful. But at the end of the day, the person has to identify with their own personal ancestral Egungun energy. So the reason we receive Egungun, or we even, embark on these paths and processes with these energies, is because we're trying to break down the barriers and obstacles to our creative moment. So if I am Irete Suka at this moment, right, and I don't have Egungun, there could be generational curses, blockages within my spiritual DNA and pathology that aren't allowing all those blessings to flow from creation or my creative energy to me right now. So that's why we consecrate Egungun, so we can open up that pathway. It's almost like opening up an artery, opening up a clogged pipe, any of those things where you're like, man, these blessings I just received now, I've been waiting for 20 years, and that's because we had spiritual blockages. So all it is a very intense realignment that occurs, hence Egungun's, straight nature, right, as far as, visibility. So usually I put the person's Odu. There have been times when I painted 9 Odus, on the front. There's been times when I haven't painted anything on the back. There's been times where you'll see people work with lines or 1s and 2s like me. There's other people who work with 1s and 0s. Both of them are perfectly legitimate, just in case you see a difference. That's in the Odu 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗍, why both are legitimate. And this is, a very 𝘃𝗶𝗵 concept based out of necessity. So now, from a candle standpoint, you probably won't see classic candles like that in an 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 practice. They usually make 𝗵𝗶𝗏𝗏 or 𝗃𝗏𝗏, which are the lámparas, right, out of cotton and various oils and things like that. So you'll see that manifestation. And then we have the famous bastón de muerto, or the bastón de Egun, or the staff of the spirit, or Egun. This is, once again, innately 𝘃𝗶𝗵. And the reason being is because this replaced the Sang Egungun, because the Sang Egungun in its natural original state is like 6 feet tall. When you look at the Atori sticks and the Atori whips in Nigeria, they're huge, right? To be able to transport them over here, they get cut down and things like that. But technically, the Sang Egungun and the Bastón of Egun are the same thing. But the ancestrally, older one is the Sang Egungun. And you could see, traits where one got from the others, because if you look at the Bastón de Egun, it shows a head, it shows a person, etc. But the real key part is the winding snake that you see on most of them. Once again, if you look at the Atori sticks, it has the winding pattern, making reference to the snake being the ancestor. It brings me back to the movie Jungle Book with 𝗏. 𝗏 was seen as all-knowing and wise because snakes were there at the beginning, right? So there's that. Now, another advantage that it provides is when we do the Oro to Egun, where Oro means sound and Egun means spirit or bone, it's much easier to tap that against the floor than the Sang Egungun, where you have to bend over and be gentle so you don't break it. Over there, the Atoris are very malleable, they're very bendable, versatile, and they're much stronger and thicker, so they're able to do that there. Whenever they do a chant or whatnot, they might tap it on the floor, sound off, etc. So the concepts are definitely born one from the other, right? So what is some common things you can give Egungun? I put the most common one here. So being that we didn't have the Sang Egungun, from that manifested the famous comidilla de Egun. So comidilla means the food or the snack or whatever. And it's nothing more than an 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 concept. 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 means to bring down to earth, where it manifests on earth. So being that we didn't have the actual Egungun icon, we did the 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏. So the Odus were present, which is incorporated to be able to call the energy. But when you bring an energy down, you have to have something for it to eat and consume. Like the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍 says. That's why when the Orishas come down from heaven to earth, we offer them water, and they have their adimu ready to be able to manifest an Orisha for ceremonial process. It's no different. So you're going to see in the plate the 9 pieces of Egun. The number 9 is crucial here. On top of each of those, or cocoa, forgive me, or agbong, the 9 pieces of cocoa, you're going to see the 9 pieces of coconut, right, to manifest Egun. On top of that, you're going to have some form of grease. In this case, Egungun's preferred one is red palm oil. On top of that, you're going to have a pepper, right, a guinea pepper, or an atare. And then, on top of that, we're going to have some flavor. We're going to put some rat, fish, and corn, being that they're the most prosperous ingredients on earth. and you know, ancestrally a great alternative for 𝗿𝗏𝗍. So, you know, that's the most common adimu to Egun, for sure. So once again, a very 𝗃𝗏𝗻 concept, absolutely. So when we provide it, we provide everything. Another thing that you might see some people have as well that might not necessarily need any attention is the necklace for Egungun, which is the multicolored beads and whatnot. Now, another thing to take into account is that there's a big difference between receiving your Isang Egungun icon and performing 𝗿𝗏𝗍 Egungun, right? 𝗿𝗏𝗍 makes reference to the initiation priesthood rites within this deity. Now, I remember somebody asked me this the other day, Baba, can you actually be a child of Egungun? And the answer is absolutely yes. Egungun can be crowned direct. That information, from what I've seen up until this point, has not arrived in the 𝗃𝗏𝗻 context. So something like that, definitely have to seek out an 𝗃𝗍 professional, at least for the time being, maybe until we assimilate it. You never know. People got a little bit in an uproar for Olokun, so imagine how they get for Egungun. Hey family, it's Joseph Baba Ifa here. How's your car looking lately? Do you want to open the door when you take the kids to school? Are you a little embarrassed to let anybody sit in there? I think it's time to get it detailed. And if you're going to do that, you got to call my guys Twin Precision Mobile Detailing. Professional, punctual, pristine. These guys are going to make your car look real good. So be sure to check them out because they are Baba approved. Thank you, family. But, you know, it might happen. But at least now in 𝗃𝗍, definitely you can make that happen. Some people say it's even ideal to go to Nigeria to do it, based on that's where the clay is or where the red dirt is. But there's people who have done it here just fine, I'm sure, and have received their masquerade. Now, what do things look like differently over there? From an 𝗃𝗍 standpoint, priesthood standpoint, you're actually going to receive your masquerade, which is the cloth and things like that that goes over the initiate of Egungun, you know, where he's parading through the streets and being celebrated. The bata drums are going crazy, and it's just a beautiful time. When you receive your icon, you don't receive that, because to be able to put that on and whatnot, you got to be crowned up. But as a way to mitigate that for the people who are only receiving the icon, sometimes you'll actually see these little mini masquerades that go over the consecrated Egungun so that he's not exposed, because if he's bones, he's a skeleton, and skeletons don't like being, you know, in the nude. They cover him. They'll cover him with a mini masquerade, or the more classic one was the red cloth that Shango gifted to his stepson Egungun, or son, depending, or nephew, depending on, you know, how you want to interpret all those different patakis from 𝗿𝗏𝗍𝗶, or 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗶, or 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗍, or 𝘃𝗏𝗍, etc. So usually the Isang Egungun icon should be wrapped in a red cloth, be living in the clay, etc. And at that point, you have a pretty complete icon. But both of them are legitimate. Both of them look drastically different. But both of them, in essence, are the same thing, where you'll see expressions of both of them on either side. Because if you look at any 𝗃𝗍 practice, the clay is always there. And if you look at our practice, you know, odus, sticks, all these different things, you can see how at one point it was one ancestral shrine, or 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗏, as it's known, right? For Egungun, which is basically the Ojúbọ Egun, which is the altar to Egungun, right? Really interesting thing as well, because someone actually asked on the channel earlier today in commentary. They said, Baba, if a pregnant woman does Orisha initiation from a priesthood standpoint, is the child automatically crowned? And I thought that was really great, because I remember I was recently listening to a couple of 𝗃𝗍 brothers talk, and a couple of them were actually initiated in Egungun. And they would actually go to Nigeria and were actually allowed into the 𝗵𝗸𝗍, or into the space where Egungun is. And you have people over there that were in their mother's wombs when they were initiated into Egungun, or actually people who literally genetically descend from Egungun. Like they have Egungun in their blood that can't go into that room. So I thought it was a great counter reference, where just because you were inside mom when you were crowned, or when she was crowned Orisha, doesn't mean you have crowned Orisha, because to be able to crown Orisha, what needs to be present? Ori. And Ori doesn't manifest until 7 or 9 days after birth. So we still got to figure out who you're initiating into, and and you know, when are we going to do it and how, right? So Egungun, you know, from a prayer standpoint, you can invoke from the heart. If you know any 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗃, you can do that as well. For those that want to learn the 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗃 to Egun, at the end of the day, it's popular music. You know, for anybody that wants to learn the 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗃 to Egun, you know, YouTube is there. There's a lot of great groups out there with some great recordings. We might be coming out with some soon, right, Phil? And you know,
Yes.
yeah, and you know, so you can learn from us as well with translations and all that. But if you want to learn the 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗃 to Egun, to sing to your Egungun, you're more than welcome to. To be able to do that is simply, you know, tapping the Egun staff on the floor 9 times. And mind you, people can know all of these processes, memorize them, enact them, but if you don't have a properly consecrated Egungun icon and altar from an initiated priest, you could do everything correctly and get no results, because self-initiation is not a legitimate thing. Egun in its essence is really where elders come from. So to be able to have this provided to you, it's always best and most coherent and practical to get it given by somebody that has gone through the process already. And not only that, but has educated themselves to the point where they're able to confection it upon you in the most precise manner. As far as water and things like that, sometimes you'll see people have a 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃 or a 𝗵𝗏 with water next to it. That's perfectly fine as well. In the 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃 context, you might see somebody put a glass of water and things like that. You know, just based on like espiritista concepts and whatnot, that's not taboo at all from an Afro-Cuban 𝘃𝗶𝗃 standpoint. This is actually basically the espiritismo of the Yoruba people, you know, where you don't see, you know, the white table and cloth and things like that, but there are remnants, you know, or you could see where espiritismo really manifested from Egungun. Because you'll see the water utilized, the libations, the omitutu, and the moyuba. There might not be a white cloth, but there's the red cloth, you know, with the masquerade and whatnot. So there's a lot of common things that facilitate spiritual trance. And even though one might look very different than the other, it's not so much about appearance as much as context and material. There's certain materials that are going to be present that are going to facilitate those kind of reactions, regardless of how different they look. So another one that people ask me quite a bit about is Baba the cigar. Baba likes cigars. You're going to see some verses of Ifa that say that the smoking of tobacco around Egungun weakens him. Now, mind you, you're going to see other verses that say that you offer tobacco to Egungun. This is something you want to really run by your elders, because Ifa does not contradict itself. It just provides options. So you have to see which one you feel most comfortable with. But I will tell you this, that, you know, the times that, you know, I've seen Egungun manifested or, you know, fed or things like that, it's very rare that you don't see a cigar there and there's lots of results. Now, is it something that you would blow on top of the icon and things like that? No, I wouldn't say that. But, you know, there's much greater taboos. And when we talk about practicality, you know, scripture is one thing and practice is another. Of course, you know, I'm very Odu based, but at the same time, you know, we have to interpret in a way that's also, you know, coherent. Because when you look at Odus like Obeyono, Ogunnavedé, Ofumbatrupong, or Ofumutaba, the tobacco was a beneficial thing, you know, and our ancestors also consumed tobacco, whether you talk about the Taínos, for anybody that, you know, is indigenous Caribbean. And then if you look at the Odu of 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗃 or Amutabala, it speaks of when the tobacco brought all the blessings. And once again, you know, the tobacco has always been a part of, you know, these belief system. Even in Africa, the Asha is utilized for spiritual purposes as well. So what do you think, Phil?
I'm impressed.
Well, how about you? What questions would you have if you were receiving your Egungun, or, you know, if you had it, you know, what do I do with it? Or, you know, as far as like connotations, like some people have even asked me like, hey, Baba, you know, is there anything negative that can come from this? And
I was about to ask you that.
Yeah, the only thing that can negatively come from it is if there's already negative things there and it's trying to disperse those energies. So if you're noticing phenomenon after you go through your Egungun process, or after you're going through spiritual processes, is because there's energies already there that are not content with something this positive and this energetic coming into the home. I mean, when we talk about the Sang Egungun's inception, is really in the Odu of 𝗿𝗏𝗍𝗏 or 𝗿𝗏𝗍𝗏, where the 𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗏 was formed. 𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗏 means the staff that I hit with, and the reason they say that is because Egungun is nothing more than the whips, and it's what they whip Egun through the street with to guide him to wherever they need to go, wherever they need him to go, whether it's to the square or to the festival or wherever it is. That's where the concept of 𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗏 comes from. And, you know, when it was first manifested, it was because Egungun was actually at war with his father Shango, and Shango was always throwing lightning bolts at him, and he's like, dude, I can't deal with this guy's abuse anymore. So when he visited Orunmila, he was able to replace himself with the icon that we see here that kind of looks like a lightning rod, right, guys?
Yeah, it does.
And when it would hit, it would absorb, you know, because it wasn't able to conduce the electricity. So it would nullify it right there, and then Shango and Egungun had to have a meeting of the minds and a mutual respect where they realized they were inseparable and they didn't need to be in conflict, and it was simply a misunderstanding. So that's why Egungun is so key to receive, family, because a lot of the time, I tell you, you see so many symptoms within this practice and pathologies, just, you know, having countless people on the mat. What do you think about the gold shoes, Phil?
I think they are fresh.
And that's what I wear to recordings, by the way, guys. Now you know.
You've got a good shoe game, but you don't talk about it.
I don't talk about it. My wife, she keeps me laced up, man. Every now and again, like she just got me the 13 buckwheats. I'm not sure if you know what those are. The white joints with the brown. Oh my God,
nice,
gorgeous. And a lot of people, you'll see certain symptoms that look like mental instability or emotional instability. And most of the time, it's really spiritual overstimulation. Now, I'm not saying that every case that presents itself is spiritual in nature, but the way we go about it is a process of elimination to get the closure, to know that if we are putting somebody in the hands of a medical professional, it's because that's absolutely what they need. So that's why it's so important, because when you have people with high mediumship, who have skills, talent, but don't have the organization, that's why they need their Egungun. It's to the point where, you know, 𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗏 doesn't even like to do spiritual masses to anybody until they have Egungun. Because, you know, with Egungun, the spiritual cord gets so organized under this icon that it just makes the medium's job so much easier. Even though she's had cases where people don't have anything and she's still very spot on, if not so spot on. So, you know, it all depends, but it is ideal. And it is one of the first deities I recommend for anybody after receiving their hand of Ifa. It's definitely a prerequisite for us to be able to go through Orisha initiation, because when we go through higher processes, you know, we look at the concept of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗃, or we have to die to become gods, Egungun gets fed. So it's better if it's the person's Egungun. And, you know, at that point, they have their Egun icon and they can interact with it how they see fit. But as far as obligations, other than the monthly basis, on an annual basis, Egungun should be fed by your professional if you're not one yourself and have priesthood rights. Please do not throw obi to Egun or feed Egun blood sacrifice unless you've gone through priesthood rights. Because, you know, the only way you could take life is by having reincarnated as a spiritual being, which is what the practitioners of Orisha and Ifa are. But once a year, you come to the conclusion as to what you're going to offer with your professional. You know, you have certain odus that say, hey, Egun wants this every time it eats, like 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗏 speaks heavily of the pigeon, or 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗏 speaks heavily of the ram. Egungun pretty much eats everything, you know, and it really isn't interested in gender or any of those things. I remember there was a time that I was conversing with some brothers and looking at some information where it said Egun only ate male animals, right? Because it's a male-oriented deity. But once I realized that he is the Orisha that is composed of all the dead people ever, I'm like, somebody ate a hen in there at some point. So I found that to be pretty null and void very quickly. But you also have the generic things that also can come out during a reading, any of those things. But you want to keep them up to date, because ancestrally, if we're not well and we aren't aligned with the people that we stand on their shoulders of, there's no way we can make progress or go higher. So Egungun is super key. It's a cornerstone for a positive Ifa career and life. And, you know, I've gotten great results with it. All of my clients and God kids have gotten amazing results with it. And, you know, when I was going through my initial steps with 𝗀𝗎𝗃, after I dominated the Egungun portion of the 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃 aspect, I was left wanting. And I was very lucky to go through apprenticeship with a couple good 𝘃𝗂𝗃𝗃 brothers in Miami, and learn the other aspect of things, and just seeing how powerful it could be if we could come together in union as a practice, without stepping on each other's toes or without hybridizing to the point where you lose the identity of the Orisha. Because that's the real issue with hybridization. It's not that we can't incorporate things from different traditions to enrich, because that happens in 𝘃𝗂𝗃𝗃 as well, just like it did in Cuba out of necessity. It's about not cutting corners for our pseudo hybridized ideals. So, for example, let's say we're going through a hand of Ifa, right? And, you know, oh, in 𝘃𝗂𝗃𝗃, they don't do this, even though you're a 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃 practitioner. In 𝘃𝗃𝗃𝗃, they don't do this, so we're not going to do that. Why not? When you realize the only investment is time and money, why are we not doing that process? And you begin to realize there might be ulterior motives there, and that's debatable. But I do believe hybridization, as far as enrichment, can never be viewed negatively by anybody that's a sound practitioner of Ifa, because for anyone to think that, you know, that we didn't both lose something when we got separated, you know, is erroneous, man. Because if you look at a family, right, and you're a family member that hasn't seen another family member in 100, you know, or 50 years, let's say something like that, and you come together and you see each other, what about all the stories that you're going to interchange that the other person didn't have? So when you talk about millions and millions of people taken away from their homeland, transculturated, transported, you're going to tell me that when we see each other again a couple couple centuries later, we're not going to have something to benefit each other for and from? There's no way. There's no way. So Egungun is a perfect example of that. Always refer back to your elders, and be sure to receive it. Everybody needs it. It's one of the first four. So there you have it, Phil. That's enough.
Yeah, man. I love this episode. I love stuff you got down there, man.
Yeah, the how-tos. It's a lovely space, man. When you look at it, there's energy there.
So are you supposed to, so you mentioned earlier that if you had spirits that were disturbing you before that, things kind of get in line after you do.
Absolutely.
But like, what should you do even before you even do this?
I love that. Yeah. So people ask me that all the time. Baba, how do I prepare for ceremony? So what are the prerequisites to receive Egungun? So you have to have your hand of Ifa, right? Because once again, without your Odu, I don't know your spiritual DNA. How am I able to consecrate the spiritual bones that compose you, right? Apart from that, all of the recommendations from the hand of Ifa have to be done beforehand, because without those being done, nothing else is going to work, because those are the things you promised to do on earth before leaving heaven. So whatever came out via your padrino's hand in his dafa of your 𝘃𝗃𝗃 or hand of Ifa, that has to be done. And then at that point, the person, you know, we have to identify what their goals are. But for anybody that wants to become Orisha or become Babalawo, Egungun, at least in our establishment, is a prerequisite. And it just streamlines things and makes things so much more kosher. Because when we talk about Egungun, there's a thing here that has to be taken into account. Based on our tradition, if Egungun is not aligned or propitiated correctly, he will literally stunt a ceremony. Where out of nowhere, there's an Okana here, an Oyekun here, a rooster got out here, something negative happened here. So we want to make sure that all of those energies are aligned and well before we go into bigger things, because they might get insulted. And it's not even that petty. It's not even that emotional. It's just they can't help us progress unless we've aligned with them and everything's flowing. It's like, you know, I can't take somebody into surgery unless I've done blood work to know that their circulation is at the level I need it to be able to maintain a state of balance during the invasive process of, or part of the process, to be able to bring the person out sound. So it's the same thing here. Egungun is very, very, very key and very imperative. And I think now that people know what goes into taking care of it, it's really not that intimidating. You know, for any, you know, of the ladies that are experiencing menses, not a good time to take care of Egungun. You kind of just want to leave them alone. Or you want to, you know, plan things out to where, you know, it's not going to be attended to around the time of your cycle. Women, from a 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃 standpoint, are a little more restricted with Egungun. because there's a story where 𝗃𝗏 was attending to Egungun and she threw coco or obi, and when the response came, it was all face down, Oyekun, and she saw a scary spirit that scared her away. So this was very bad because, you know, it left the oracle open and there was a little bit of phenomenal, and, you know, things weren't progressing well in the village. So 𝗃𝗏𝗃 performed divination. Ultimately, they had to make offerings to Ogun, where Ogun was the only one with the courage to be able to stand before the ancestors and throw the obi and make the offerings necessary. That's where the Egungun cult became a little more masculine in nature. So that's why you see in the 𝗃𝗏𝗃 tradition, when we're going to give obi to Egun, we ask the ladies to, you know, turn around so they don't relive what 𝗃𝗏 went through. And that not being observed could even be abortive. Because they say the response of Egun, a baby, direct contact, could be very negative. Now, these are 𝗃𝗏𝗃 concepts. This doesn't apply in 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 at all, from what I understand, when they're throwing the 𝗵𝗏𝗏. So it's just another a point of reference and things like that. You can give drum or 𝗵𝗏 to Egungun. Egungun is one of the owners of 𝗵𝗏 along with Shango. So he's big on the music, the oro to Egun, all these different things. We're going to have some resources up for anybody that wants to learn the oro to Egun. It's going to be very accessible. But I'll go ahead and finish the episode with the opening song, right? Of 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗲, which is basically saying, you know, 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗲, we were calling you so we can see you. 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁, you know, they're sleeping, you know, we don't see them. 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗃𝗏𝗃, we still don't see them, you know, we don't see them in the house. 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏, all of the spirits, please come so we can see you and you can be received, right? So, 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗲𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏, 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗏𝗃𝗏, 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏, 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏. Asheo. Remember time, Phil.
I love it, man.
That's a good one. The horns.
I had to give you that one.
My man.
All right. It's that time, folks.
Oh, it's that time.
Yeah. Let's show some love to the people who show love to you. And sorry I didn't respond earlier. I had some Philly cheesesteak in my mouth.
Oh, man, Phil. I tell you, I don't know what you're doing back there, man, but you're making it happen, man. We're at 160 plus, man. You keep doing what you're doing.
All right, folks. If you look directly under this video, there's a join our membership program button. It gives you access to extra shows, early releases, discounts on merch or courses. You name it.
You name it.
All right, here we go. Show some love to the premium super fans. That's our mid-level tier.
Premium.
We got Maddie J.
Okay, thank you, Maddie.
Diana the Goddess.
Okay.
Music Lover 29.
Very nice.
Janine Jacobson.
Great.
Ray Valentine.
Thank you.
We got Tierra Omalade.
Okay, Omilade, blessings.
We got one person has 2 premium memberships.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Ifa 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏
2 times.
Yeah. We got Sanga Janai,
Okay.
𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲,
What's up?
and we're gonna round it out with J Palacio.
Yay. Couple closing remarks, guys, before we go ahead and disconnect. 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗃𝗿candlesandmore.com is up and running for all of your service and product needs. We do ship. If you haven't had the opportunity, be sure to check us out on the podcast apps. If you can't watch us on YouTube that day, whether it's iHeart Radio, Spotify, Apple, we're doing pretty well on there with over 1 million download views, etc. A big thank you from all of us here at Our Roots Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, guys, and don't ever forget to see the light. Thank you.
Baba Joseph showed the path today. Baba knows the way, we follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients, he